because of our particular design and the way our main sheet and traveler system runs on this particular boat, where we're running it right in between the back of the Dodger and the front of the Bimini, we really don't have the ability to have much in the way of a side curtain that comes off of the back of the Dodger. But I'm going to show you how to pattern them anyway, because on many boats you will have the ability to have those side curtains should you have enough leftover material in the kit, which we don't guarantee, by the way, but if you do, you can make the side curtains out of either sunbrella or out of remaining window material. So we're going to go to the loft floor, and we're going to get a piece of pattern material that roughly will come from here down to about where I'm sitting, because that would be pretty much normal, and then run forward and back up to the Dodger in somewhat of a manner like this. So before we go to the floor, let's just take some basic measurements so we're not bringing out too much pattern material. So I'm going to say we're going to want to go about 29 inches, and we're going to need a piece that's roughly 29 inches, probably, yeah, it looks like 29 by about 36 or so. So with those measurements in mind, let's go inside. All right, so we've got some of our leftover pattern material here now, and I just want to think about what I was looking at on the boat, and we had a 29 inch where it's going to attach to the back of the Dodger. I'm going to add a couple inches to that. Let's just go 31 inches, but I want this to be a nice straight edge, because this edge should be straight as it attaches to the back of the Dodger tails. Okay, so we've got our nice straight edge here. Now we want to come along the bottom, and we had 29 inches for our measurement along the bottom. We're going to make that, let's say, 32 inch. Yeah, let's go with it. We knew 29 was about right for as far back as we wanted to go, so we'll stick with that 29. And what I'm going to do is sort of mark segments in an arc. Let's fill those in. You'll understand why I'm doing this here in a second. Okay, now we knew we wanted about 36 inches off the back edge, and because our height grew over here at the front, that's probably going to be a bit longer. So let's assume it's about 38 inches, which is going to bring us roughly into this area. So where those two intersect, that's where I'm going to strike my line. Although this isn't really going to be a straight edge, we know we had some curvature here, so we're going to actually leave all this on here. Just want you to see roughly what we're doing, okay? And then our back edge here is going to be roughly straight and come up to here. Okay, and that should leave us with a piece that is about the right size. Now the only edge I'm going to cut is that edge that's going to attach to the back of the Dodger. And I'm going to try and cut that right on that straight line. Okay, now here on the bottom, we're just going to loosely cut this, not following any of the lines that I've done here. I just don't want it to be so big that the material's going to get in the way. And on the back edge that we drew, again, don't have to cut that perfectly. We're going to cut outside of that. I want my pattern piece to be plenty large, is what I'm getting at. There we go. So, what we really have here is one straight reference point to work from and just arbitrary edges here at this point. Next thing we do is take this out to the boat, and we need to come up with a way of attaching this edge so that we can get a better pattern along the other two edges. Okay, back in the cold. All right, now, first thing we want to do is find a way to attach this to our anti-wicking flap, or our tail here, if you will, on the back of our Dodger. And there are a number of ways that you can attach to the tail. I think in this case, since this is so small, we would probably put snaps back here to attach. But what I want to do is take that straight edge we cut, and we're going to determine, we probably want our snaps in line with these other snaps, and this piece will ultimately go underneath, but I'm going to put it on top for now. So I'm going to unsnap this. Nice thing about snaps is sometimes you can just take the fabric and snap with pattern material right through, and that'll hold it. See how that works? Now up top here, we're just going to look on the inside, and you'll have to take my word for what I'm doing here, but I'm lining it up so my straight edge is perfectly parallel to the back edge here. And I'm good there. Bring it up here. Now I'm going to use a stapler. A straight pin would work here too, but I'm going to pull it up, get my stapler in position, and I'm going to staple right through the canvas. All right, and that'll hold us in place there. That's pretty much all there is to that. Now, we want to bring this down, and we want to find a spot where we're going to bring the back edge, which looks to be about right here, where my finger is. But before I do anything there, I'm going to once again pull out my trusty double-sided basting tape. And what I'm going to do is, just so this doesn't move on us as we're doing this, I'm just going to lay down some tape along this edge and peel up the top transfer tape. Okay, get that out of the way so you can see what's going on here. And now I'm going to smooth this in place right along that tape. Make sure that all looks good. Now we need to do some marking here. First thing we're going to mark is, it looks like we're right at the right point. We want to mark because we want this to finish up so that it matches up with this. So I'm going to mark that. I'm also going to mark along this back edge in a couple of spots so I have a new reference. Okay, and that should be a straight line essentially. Now what we want to do is decide where we would want to come in here. Usually this would be where your strap eye would be for where we've got our webbing running way too far aft, obviously in this case. Usually it would run straight down inside the back of the curtain. And if my traveler and main sheet would allow it, I would probably want this to come back to here so that it would look nice. Could even come up to here if I wanted, but I want to show you a fairly deep skirt when we do this so you can see what might be normal. And then from this point, and I'm going to say right here, from this point, I would want it to finish right about where the strap, so I'm glad we added to it, because we want this to cover the strap. So pretty much right at the top, I'm marking it from the inside above the strap where the opening is. Oh, and you can see where I made that mark at the top of the opening for where the webbing comes through. If our webbing had been up higher here, we wouldn't have been able to do that, and then we would have just made the mark wherever we wanted it to be pleasing. But I like to have my straps be covered by the side curtains if at all possible. Okay, now interesting thing, we've done this on the starboard side. No reason to do it on the port side. The boat's symmetrical enough that we can use this one pattern for both sides of the boat. And I'm then going to connect a line from that point to here with a little bit of hollow in it when we're done. Now, the only other thing that we mark here is the shape that we want for where the snaps are going to be positioned in this bottom edge. And I'm going to get off the boat so that I can trace that. It just so happens that the curve that I cut here is pretty darn accurate, but I really think we want to probably bring this, I'm just going to freehand it. I'm thinking in terms of where my snaps are going to be. You know, I'll have snaps, and I don't, probably every, I took my ruler inside, but every 6 inches again, 6 to 3. Yeah, on this I'd probably go no more than, no closer than 6 inches. So, you know, we might have one here, we might have one here, which makes sense. And then I need to make sure I give myself plenty of room down here to get one in here, and then probably want to get something down into here. So I'm bringing my line down so I have plenty of room outside of this point. And that looks like a pleasing shape. I'm going to jump off the boat now and see if I'm completely happy with that looking off from the side. Yeah, I think that looks good. Again, there's nothing in stone, written in stone about how this has to look. It just has to look pleasing. All right, I did forget to do one thing while I was out there on the boat, and I forgot to put our all important markings on the panel. So this would be sout, so starboard outside. However, when we use this for the other side, of the boat. This side will be pout. So we're creating one pattern that can be used for both sides of the Dodger. Now, we've got a straight edge already where it's going to connect. We have our bottom edge, bottom curve, and we were happy with this curve all the way up to this point as well, so this is fine here, okay? And we have our point here that we want to roughly connect to our point up top here. And I'm going to go ahead and, for right now, put a straight line through these 2 points. Okay. But we all know that a straight back edge there probably isn't going to support very well. We're going to want some tension on this back edge, so we either have to reinforce it heavily to make it stable, or we might even want to put a slight hollow on it. This particular panel is small enough that I really think we don't need to put a hollow on it. We're going to leave it straight, especially since we're going to cut our material out of extra glass. On small Dodgers, you almost always have extra glass, and I think these should be clear curtains anyway. So no hollow here. If I was making it out of Sunbrella, which is somewhat softer, I would cut a slight gentle curve to this back edge, knowing that I want it, and if it was a bigger panel, knowing that when it's under tension, I want to make sure that back edge doesn't flutter. But again, we're so small here, this makes sense. Now, if I was making it out of Sunbrella, I also might want to add a 1/2 inch all the way around like we've done on all the other panels, so that we could create our tabling strips all around the Sunbrella panel. Now, since we're doing ours out of the remaining glass or clear vinyl that we have, we're not going to add that 1/2 inch hem. Instead, we're going to just cut our pattern right on our lines that we've drawn here. Forward edge, which attaches to the tail, is already cut. And then we're going to cut our glass to match that exact size. And then Deb, and she's going to take over next, is going to create facing strips for both the top and the bottom side of the glass on all 3 edges of our glass panel here. Then we'll install the fasteners and put it on the boat. Mark our dashed line here as, let's mark it as back edge of tail. And I'm going to fill that in a little bit better. You don't want to cut on this line. This is simply a match-up line for when but we will transfer this to our pattern, because that's the match-up line for where our back edge of our tails should overlap our side curtain. So we cut it next.
Here's that panel all cut out, ready for construction. Using that pattern, we'll lay it on top of our vinyl window material, trace around it, and then cut it out. This window has 2 straight sides here and on this side, and a curved edge here. If you have excess umbrella left over, use it. Use your soapstone pencil and mark the curved edge of the vinyl window material. We'll start there. There are no hard fast rules in determining the width of your facing. We're going to make our facing 1.5 inches. So we're actually going to measure up 2.5 inches, because we will take a 1/2 inch hem from each edge of the facing. So we'll mark 2.5 inches all along that curved line. We'll then take the vinyl window material and lower it to the marks that we created on the canvas and fill in the blanks with the soapstone pencil. That follows the same curve that we had down below. You'll notice we did not add any extra length to this facing strip. That's because it'll actually be a little bit shorter, and we'll cover it with other strips. You'll see that later on. This side of the window is completely straight, so we'll use our ruler and our soapstone pencil and mark a line along it. This facing strip will be a little bit longer than the edge of the window. We'll make the two ends at least a ½ inch longer. They really should be approximately an inch longer, so you don't have to worry about making this strip too short. So add a ½ inch or an inch to each end. We'll follow the same procedure and mark this facing 2½ inches, because when we're done, it'll fold down to 1½ inch. Now we'll determine the width of this facing strip, so we'll put the glass up against the edge, and we want to add about an inch to each end. We'll add an inch to the other end as well. We'll do the same procedure to the last edge. We'll also add an inch extra on each end. Here are those 3 facing sides all done. We're going to also label our glass and our facing strips so we don't get confused when it comes to constructing them.
A goes to this side, B for this side, and C for the bottom.
Now just cut the facing out with scissors. There's no need to use a hot knife because we're actually going to create a hem. You'll need to duplicate those same facing pieces again, so just follow the same procedure using those as a pattern for your exact mirror images. Once those are cut out, we'll take it over to our window and prepare to baste it to the window. Here's what they all look like. It's a good idea to lay the facing strips on top or underneath the glass to make sure they're facing the right direction. In other words, they are the appropriate shape on top of the glass. On this bottom facing section, we're going to cut a ½ inch off of each end so that the facing actually sits a ½ inch inside the edge of the glass. Then we'll cover it with the top strips that go along the sides. When the top facing is hemmed like this on the top and the bottom is we're showing here, you'll see that you have a nice finished edge because that other facing lays inside here. Anywhere the facing lies underneath another facing strip, you'll cut them short so they're a ½ inch inside the edge of the glass. Follow the angle of the glass as you cut it off. Take the mirror piece and cut them down exactly the same length. We'll then create a ½ inch hem on each one of the long sides of these facing strips. We'll use 129 or double-sided tape to pre-base those hems in place. Be accurate when you're creating these hems because basically this facing needs to be an exact mirror of the underneath facing. So be accurate when you fold it over to a ½ inch on each of the long edges. We'll do that to all the facing strips, being sure that they lay appropriately on the glass. You don't want to create a hem on the wrong side of the facing and then find that your shape doesn't fit or the ends aren't angled appropriately, so be sure you're placing that hem on the right side of the facing. Now that those hems are complete, we'll apply double-sided tape to both of the long sides of the facing, and we'll use that to adhere it down to the vinyl window. We'll then peel off the paper, revealing the glue, and baste it to our window. Remember, this facing strip will be a little bit short on both ends, so we'll baste it starting about a ½ inch from the edge of the glass, as shown here. We'll follow the edge of the glass as we baste the entire length of this facing down. So just smooth it down all the way to the opposite side. The opposite side should be about a ½ inch short as well because the other facing will lay on top of it. We don't need all that bulk at the one end. Flip the window over and do the exact same thing to the facing that is the mirror image. That one will lay right on top of the previous facing on the other side. Start at about a ½ inch from the edge of the window and ending a ½ inch from the edge right on top of the previous panel. We'll not show creating the hems on the other facing strips, but we've done that and we've applied the double-sided tape to the back side. We're now ready to apply those facing strips to the window. At each corner, you'll have a facing strip lay on top of another strip. This facing strip at this corner will lay on top of that previous strip we just put down. So we'll create a 1/2 inch hem here. It doesn't have to be a 1/2 inch, it just has to be hemmed under. And then we'll start that so that the 1/2 inch hem is right even with the edge of the glass or that edge of that previous facing that we put down. That way it hides it and makes it look nice and finished. And we don't have all that excess bulk because that second panel of facing underneath doesn't go all the way to the edge. Then just base it down as you did previously. We'll do that at every one of the corners where one facing strip lays on top of the other. We'll not show all that. And the final facing pieces will be hemmed on the short ends, 1/2 inch, so they look finished, and lay over the top of those previous facing strips we already basted onto the window. Here you can see Deb creating that 1/2 inch hem at the end. And then baste it down. And then once she's basted it in place, she'll do the hem at the opposite end so that it comes out nice and even. Okay, it's basted in place. Now she'll create the last hem. Then we'll trim off the excess there with scissors.
We'll point off here from the fold.
Then do the same thing to the opposite end. Then just baste the bottom facing on and we're complete, ready to sew. We'll take it to the sewing machine and sew a straight stitch around the inner perimeter, then the outer perimeter. It really doesn't matter which order you do, just around both is important. And everything's been basted in place so nothing is going to move on you while you're sewing. Okay, you can see Deb pivoting on the needle here. And then she continues to sew. She'll do a reverse there to lock down that facing that lays over top of the second facing. And here it is complete. Now we'd obviously do the same procedure for the second window on the opposite side of the Dodger. Then we'll put our snaps on.
All right, we're nearing completion of our project, but you see we still have not resolved the problem of the straps to hold the Dodger and the Bimini in place. And again, our problem is because of the main sheet / traveler movement as the boom comes off center line. We will solve that, and we'll take some short video of that to show you how we solved it. That would be different depending upon each and every boat. But I want to show you a little bit about how our side panel came out. Now this boat's too small for a side panel, so we're not actually going to install it here, but we wanted to make one so you could see how to do it. What I would do if I was attaching this side panel now would be to position it under this edge and use either cloth-to-cloth snap fasteners or cloth-to-cloth twist lock fasteners, which are included in your kit, in order to create attachment points here. And then use cloth-to-surface snap fasteners like we did at the front of the Dodger all along the bottom edge here, and perhaps a cloth-to-surface common sense fastener here for strength. And that's how our side panel would attach to provide even more protection from the elements and the wind when you're sitting under the Dodger. Eric brought up the point that we might want to use a gypsy stud in this position so that we could actually have a snap on top of a snap. And if you were using a gypsy stud, what you would do here would be to install a gypsy stud on the top side, which would essentially look like a stud, with a socket on the back side, and the socket is this piece here. So the socket would snap to the stud on the boat, and then the gypsy stud is actually a stud. It would look like this on this top surface, and it would be right here, and then this button and socket combination would snap onto the gypsy stud. So you could use one snap position to hold both panels. Only downfall to that would be that you would have to unsnap this snap each and every time you went to install and remove your side curtains.